Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Charlie Kirk's wife Erica has made her first public comments since his death. The prime suspect, remember, has now been nabbed. He is in custody. Now, speaking through tears, Charlie Kirk's wife Erica thanked first responders and police officials who acted bravely and meanwhile has pledged to continue Kirk's campus tours and the podcast that he hosted. The suspected murderer of Charlie Kirk, Tyler Robinson, is set to be formally charged on Tuesday. Now, the Utah police has collected forensic evidence from his apartment. Robinson was taken into custody a mere 33 hours after the murder of Kirk, and the rigorous investigation is underway. The US has urged G7 partners to impose tariffs on countries purchasing oil from Russia, singling out China and India. Now, the United States has warned that only a unified approach to cutting off Russia's energy revenues could bring an end to the war. The UN General Assembly has backed a declaration urging steps towards a two-state solution for Palestine. Meanwhile, Israel and the United States have opposed the move, denouncing it as biased and harmful to peace. Russia has stated that peace talks with Kiev are on a pause. This comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that Russian President Putin still wants to capture the entirety of Ukraine. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has warned that he's running out of patience with Putin. The Chinese military has condemned the sailing of a US and British warship through the Taiwan Straits, saying that it ordered naval and air forces to monitor and warn the two ships. Meanwhile, Britain's Defense Ministry has stated that the sailing was a routine passage, and the US Indo-Pacific Command has also described the message as routine transit. Nepal's former Supreme Court Chief Justice Sushila Karki has now become the country's interim Prime Minister. This comes after deadly anti-corruption protests ousted the government. Karki has become the first woman to lead the Himalayan nation. Massive 7.4 earthquake has struck near the east coast of Russia's Kamchatka. A tsunami warning has also been issued, and no immediate reports of damage or casualties have emerged so far. Well, viewers, those were the headlines and our top focus. What's happening as far as the probe into Charlie Kirk's death is concerned? We're now learning that state police in St. George in Utah have collected forensic evidence from an apartment where the suspect is said to have lived. Now, the apartment is in a complex around 7 miles from the suspect's family home where he was arrested. The suspect itself, identified as Tyler Robinson, was captured after he implied that he had committed the murder to a friend. Now, the person in turn contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office on Thursday. Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, has made her first public statement following the arrest of the suspected gunman in her husband's killing. Erica Kirk thanked US President Donald Trump and his family for their support, stating that her husband loved Trump. She also praised Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife Usha for honoring Kirk and helping to bring him back home. Listen in.
I want to thank my husband's dear friend, Vice President Vance, and his phenomenal wife, Usha, for their love and support. You guys honored my husband so well bringing him home. You both are tremendous. I want to thank President Trump and his incredible family for the same. Mr. President, my husband loved you. And he knew that you loved him too. He did. Your friendship was amazing. You supported him so well, as did he for you.
Meanwhile, people from around the world have mourned Charlie Kirk's death, and after this sad demise, they've paid him tribute. Listen in.
This was an assassination. This was an attack on America. This was an attack on freedom of speech. This was Antifa violence. And the fact that the shooter had Antifa engraved on his bullet. And this is why I keep proving my point. Antifa is evil. Antifa is the work of Satan.
I feel good about the fact that they arrested him, but it's not over. There are other people waiting in the shadows. Unfortunately, we have to be the bigger people, and we have to carry on Charlie's legacy by believing in God and doing godful things and not horrible things.
Freedom of speech is completely dead in this country, and people like Charlie Kirk were carrying the torch of freedom to encourage more speech, not less, because when you can't speak truthfully about things in society, that's when all the bad ideologies come along.
Freedom of speech. We're meant to be the nation who's, leading the free world in terms of yes, we can have different opinions. And we're privileged to be in the West. I'm so lucky to be here in London because I've got the ability. In a lot of other countries in the world, I'll be killed for my opinions. That's kind of starting to happen in America.
All right, we've heard what some of the people have had to say. Meanwhile, with us on the broadcast is Mr. Ross Feingold, political analyst, joining us from Taipei. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. A lot of the people that we've just heard pointed out to the fact that this was an attack on freedom of speech. A lot of leaders from across party lines in the United States of America have come out, condemned whatever happened, and they've stated that political violence is not a solution and that dialogue is what is important regardless of differences. So could this then be a wake-up call for the Trump administration to ban assault rifles, or will they still not do so?
There's absolutely no chance of a ban on assault rifles. The administration, as well as the Republican majorities in Congress, their views on this issue are quite well known. I know it's difficult for people outside the United States to sometimes fathom the approach in the United States towards gun control, but it is enshrined in the Constitution, and the courts have upheld it. And people who support gun rights take this issue extraordinarily seriously. And frankly, if anything, this type of violence, this assassination, will only prompt people to be even more firm in their beliefs in their right to own guns. So in short, no, this is not going to change the Trump administration's approach to gun control at all.
And is this only going to deepen the fissures that already exist in American society between the Republicans and the Democrats?
Certainly, this will be a wound that will hurt deeply conservatives, and not just younger people who were followers of Charlie Kirk, but people who are conservatives, who vote Republican, who supported President Trump. They're going to be very hurt by this assassination for quite a long time to come. But even when the wound from this assassination starts to dissipate months or years later, there's always going to be issues that manifest itself in a fissure in heated debate, whether that's a social policy issue or some aspect of government spending. The partisan divide will remain intense no matter what the issue is, and that's not going to change going forward.
All right, so I request you to stay on with us. Meanwhile, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news and updates coming in. We're now learning that an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council has been convened in order to address the drone incursions into Polish airspace from Russia. Now, for the first time in history, Poland has called for such an emergency meeting. Poland's Secretary of State Makryn Bosaki has stated that the drone incursions into its territory by Russia were a purposeful violation of Poland's territorial integrity. He stressed that these incursions were a deliberate attempt and not a mistake. The United States has also reacted rather strongly to these, and acting U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Dorothy Shea, has stated that the United States stands by its NATO allies and has assured that it will defend NATO territory. She further added that Russia has intensified its attacks on Ukraine since the Alaska summit and has called on Russia to live up to its commitment to diplomacy. Meanwhile, the Russian representative has denied violating Polish airspace and has claimed that there were no targets marked on Polish territory. However, NATO members are currently holding consultations under Article 4 of NATO's founding treaty. This article allows members to bring any issue of concern, especially related to security, to the table for discussion. Listen in to what was said at the meeting.
Such incidents happened before, but this time we know that that was the first time since the beginning of Russian full-scale invasion on Ukraine in 2022 that Polish territorial integrity has been purposely violated on such an unprecedented scale. We know, and I repeat, we know that it was not a mistake.
The United States stands by our NATO allies in the face of these alarming airspace violations. The United States is consulting with Poland and our other NATO allies under Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty. And rest assured, we will defend every inch of NATO territory.
With us on the broadcast is Professor Rohan Gunaratne, International Affairs expert, joining us from Singapore. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting developments taking place as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. We've earlier seen statements by Donald Trump, of course, pointing out to the fact that it takes two to tango. He earlier stated that when Putin wanted to go ahead and establish peace, Zelensky did not. Now that Zelensky does, Putin does not. So this is the sort of rhetoric that's coming from the US president. Meanwhile, Poland has called for a UNSC meeting, an extraordinary UNSC meeting to address the incursions in its airspace. So where do you see this headed next? Also in picture is now Trump urging G7 nations to slap tariffs against China and India.
Yeah, what we are seeing is in Poland, there was a clear violation of airspace by the Russians. But it was not deliberate, it was not intentional. Because if the Russians wanted to attack Poland, they have the capabilities to do so. Russia is a military power. The Russian target was Ukraine. But certainly because of the airspace violation, the Europeans and the Americans have now decided to take some action against Russia. But what is important is at this time, these governments should be very patient because President Trump is doing his best after the Alaska summit to bring about a resolution on Ukraine. And this incursion in Poland should not affect that very strategic move to build, to restore peace between Ukraine and Russia.
All right, sir, I request you to stay on with us as we track more news and updates coming in this time. As far as what's happening in the Middle East is concerned, we're now learning that Israel has dismissed the United Nations General Assembly resolution that endorses a declaration outlining steps towards a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. Meanwhile, Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesperson Oren Marmestein has stated that the resolution encourages Hamas to continue the war. He has also called the resolution a disgraceful decision. Meanwhile, the Israeli United Nations ambassador has stated that the resolution does not designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. Take a look.
This declaration is one-sided. It does not designate Hamas as a terrorist organization, and it dares to equate the release of Israeli hostages with the release of convicted terrorists. Shame on you. This meaningless political maneuver takes place while innocent people remained blindfolded in Gaza's tunnels, starved, tortured, waiting. Meanwhile, many members of this assembly blindfold themselves by choice. By endorsing this declaration, you cover your own eyes. You choose not to see the truth, to ignore the facts. Israel will not wear that blindfold. We see the hostages. We see the terror. We see this declaration for what it is, a political gesture, an act of theater. Madam President, we will not allow Hamas to win in this assembly what it could not gain on October 7th.
The declaration is endorsed by the 193-member General Assembly. It has received 142 votes in favour and 10 against. Meanwhile, 12 countries have abstained from voting. The resolution condemns the attacks that have taken place against Israel by Hamas on the 7th of October 2023, which triggered the war that is taking place in Gaza. It also condemns the attacks by Israel against civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza. This resolution comes ahead of a high-level United Nations conference on the two-state solution, which is scheduled to be co-chaired by France and Saudi Arabia on the 22nd of September. Still with us on the broadcast is Professor Gunaratna. We've of course heard what the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations has had to say. He stated that the countries that have voted in favor are wearing blindfolds, but we can clearly see the numbers. 142 nations have voted in favor of this resolution, while 10 against and 12 have been abstained. What do you make of this international pressure that is now mounting against Netanyahu?
Netanyahu and Israel will continue its campaign to decimate the rank and file of Hamas. Israel cannot be stopped even by the United States. Israel believes that after October 7th, 2023 Hamas-led massacre that Israel should disarm Hamas and also free the hostages. It is so important for such resolutions to designate groups like Hamas as terrorist, because if anyone examines that attack in 2023, Hamas killed, maimed, injured, raped, and committed arson. So what is so important for the world today is to ensure that there is sufficient food and supplies to the innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza, but simultaneously 100% to support Israel's campaign to dismantle the governing and the military structures of Gaza so that there will be peace as long as these terrorist groups like the Lebanese Hezbollah, Ansarullah in Yemen, and Hamas and these groups exist. There will be no peace. The world must stand against hostage taking in the 21st century and should ensure that these groups are totally dismantled so that there will be a harmonious Middle East and a harmonious world.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. Meanwhile, we shift our focus towards what's happening in the Indo-Pacific. We're now learning that Taiwan's top China policymaker Chiu Cheng has stated that China is actively preparing for war to seize Taiwan. This statement was made during a high-profile address in Washington, D.C. Now, speaking at the Heritage Foundation, Chiu has stated that the Chinese Communist Party has never ruled out using force against Taiwan and has accused Beijing of intensifying military preparations, including recent maneuvers around the island. He has stated that if China were to take Taiwan by force, it would trigger a domino effect. Listen in.
If Taiwan were to be taken over by China by force, it will trigger a domino effect, undermine the regional balance of power, and direct threat the security and the prosperity of the United States.
Chiu has argued that China's push for unification is part of a broader strategy to drive out US influence and eventually replace America as the global leader. Now, his remarks have come as China's newest aircraft carrier, the Fujian, sailed through the Taiwan Strait, a move which is seen as expanding Beijing's power projection in the region. Now, China, meanwhile, also condemned the transit of US and British warships through the Taiwan Strait. The US and its allies insist that the strait is international waters, while Beijing claims it as part of its own territory. Chiu, meanwhile, has thanked Washington for its ongoing support, including military aid and strategic backing. Meanwhile, China's embassy in Washington has reiterated its commitment to peaceful reunification, but has warned that it would take all necessary measures to oppose Taiwan's independence and so-called foreign interference. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Ross Feingold, political analyst, joining us from Taipei. Thank you so much for waiting rather patiently. Interesting developments happening in the Taiwan Strait. We've recently seen a lot of incursions as well from Chinese aircrafts, from the PLA Navy. And in the midst of all of that, China is coming out and pointing fingers at the United States and the United Nations for their ships sailing through international waters. What do you make of China's rhetoric, and do you think China is preparing for war?
Certainly China is preparing for war. They say they want peaceful reunification, but at the same time, they have not renounced the use of force. So it's imperative on Taiwan, as well as the United States and its allies around the region, to prepare accordingly and invest in their own defense. So it's no surprise that China's using its Navy in ways that it hasn't done previously. They've been investing in their military, including their Navy, and they're going to make use of those assets. If their aircraft carrier is ready to sail, it's going to sail, and it's going to project power around Taiwan or further out into the Pacific Ocean. And again, it's imperative on other countries to respond accordingly.
All right, sir. Also, as far as Chinese buildup is concerned, we've seen them also doing also in fact showcasing aggression in similar fashion with other countries in Southeast Asia as well, whether it's the Philippines, whether it's Vietnam. So we all know what they're doing as far as Spratly Islands is concerned. There's a lot of military buildup on Mischief Reef as well, Fiery Cross Reef. We're seeing a lot of these airstrips come up. They're constructing artificial islands as well. There is in fact a UN clause ruling against China, but it does not seem to be adhering to it.
China has ignored that arbitration ruling from 2016. That's not going to change. And as you mentioned, China has built up and continues to build up its facilities on the islands that it does occupy in the South China Sea. So it goes back to the previous point that it's imperative on other countries in the region, as well as the United States, Australia, Japan, to take their own response. And that includes investing in their own militaries and sailing their ships in international waters, which they do, but arguably they should be doing more of that.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time speaking to us on NewsX World. Meanwhile, viewers, shifting focus away from Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific towards South Asia. We're now learning that Nepal's former Supreme Court Chief Justice Sushila Karki has become the country's interim Prime Minister after deadly anti-corruption protests ousted the government. Now, Karki, who is 73 years old, was sworn in a brief ceremony, becoming the first woman to lead the nation after a deal was reached with the protesting leaders. She's widely regarded as a person who has a clean image and is being supported by student leaders from the Gen Z who led the movement to oust the government that was in power earlier. Now, the agreement between President Ramchandra Paudel and the protesting leaders was reached after days of consultation. Karki is expected to appoint ministers in her cabinet within a few days. Now, Nepal's army is still patrolling the streets of Kathmandu as the country is still reeling from its worst unrest in decades. The restrictions were only briefly lifted to allow residents to buy essential items. With us on the broadcast is Ms. Shruti Dasgupta, International Affairs expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time, speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting news coming in from Nepal. Their former Supreme Court Chief Justice has been sworn in as their Prime Minister. What does it mean for Nepal next? We do know that, and we have seen similar such scenes take place in other countries in South Asia over the last couple of years, whether it is Sri Lanka or Bangladesh for that matter. Do we think, and in your opinion, are things looking up for Nepal in the near future?
Well, I certainly hope so, Pia. Greetings and thank you for inviting me. I do hope that Nepal is looking for a more peaceful and a more orderly next coming few days under Sushila Karki. She is a former jurist, as you said. She's had this very turbulent tenure as Chief Justice of Nepal because she was against surpassing hierarchy and appointing police heads up as per the government's own whims and fancies. And that particular judgment landed her into an impeachment motion where the Nepal government themselves were unable to secure the two-thirds majority required before her retirement in 2017. So as a figurehead, people have more belief and faith in her that she's not corrupt, or at least not as in tune with the earlier systems that have led to the current protests. The instability in governance is one of the reasons why corruption and unemployment have peaked in the nation of Nepal. And so I hope Sushila Karki's first job is to first restore law and order, then ensure that the right people in place are there to ensure a next set of elections that happen. And for that, I think they will have to wait for a few more days. I hope, unlike the Bangladesh issue, where radical elements come forth and take on the guise of political parties, under Sushila Karki, at least Nepal would not face a similar future, and there is peace, normalcy and progress in the future of Nepal and its citizens.
Indeed. Ma'am, with that, I would like to thank you for taking our time, speaking to us on NewsX World, sharing your perspective on what's happening in Nepal and what exactly is in store for the country in the future as it navigates through these turbulent times. Meanwhile, shifting focus to Russia, we're now learning that a 7.4 magnitude earthquake has struck off the east coast of the Kamchatka region in Russia's far east. The epicenter was located 111 kilometers east of the city of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky at a depth and struck at the depth of 39.5 kilometers. Now, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center has warned that hazardous waves could affect the Russian coast within 300 kilometers of the epicenter. Remember, earlier in July, the region experienced one of its strongest earthquakes of 8.8 magnitude that generated tsunami waves up to 4 meters and triggered tsunami warnings across the Pacific. All right, viewers, due to paucity of time, that's all we have for this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.